The marble floors of the Whitmore mansion gleamed like mirrors under the crystal chandeliers, reflecting a world I could only dream of touching. Every morning at 5:30, I'd slip through the service entrance, my worn sneakers silent against the polished stone, carrying my bucket of supplies and the weight of invisibility that came with my uniform. My name is Maria Santos, and for 3 years, I'd been part of the army of staff that kept Rebecca Whitmore's world pristine. At 42, I'd learned that people like her didn't see people like me. We were furniture with heartbeats, necessary but forgettable, existing in the spaces between their important moments. The mansion sprawled across 2 acres in the hills of Malibu, with floor-to-ceiling windows that captured the Pacific Ocean like a living painting. Each room told stories of wealth I couldn't fathom: Persian rugs worth more than my annual salary, artwork that belonged in museums, and a wine cellar that could fund my daughter's college education twice over. Rebecca Whitmore was 38, though she carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted her place in the world. Heiress to a tech empire, she moved through her domain with purpose, her heels clicking against the marble in rhythms that had become as familiar to me as my own breathing. Her auburn hair always fell perfectly around her shoulders, and her green eyes held the kind of intelligence that built fortunes and commanded boardrooms. That Tuesday morning in October started like any other. The California sun painted golden rectangles across the foyer as I dusted the antique console table, careful around the fresh orchids that cost more than my weekly groceries. The house felt different when Rebecca was home, charged with an energy that made the air itself seem more expensive. I was polishing the brass handles of the library doors when I heard her heels approaching. Instinctively, I stepped aside, becoming part of the wallpaper as she swept past in a charcoal business suit that probably cost more than my car. She paused at the threshold, and for a moment that stretched like eternity, our eyes met in the reflection of the polished brass. "The book's on the 3rd shelf," she said, her voice carrying the kind of authority that moved mountains and stock prices. "They're dusty." "Yes, ma'am. I'll take care of it right away." The words came automatically, practiced from years of professional invisibility. But she didn't move away. Instead, Rebecca stepped closer, close enough that I could smell her perfume. Something French and sophisticated that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "You've been working here for 3 years?" The question caught me off guard. Employers rarely remembered how long their staff had been around, let alone acknowledged their existence beyond the tasks they performed. "Yes, ma'am. 3 years this November." Her green eyes studied my face with an intensity that made my cheeks burn. There was something different in her gaze, not the casual dismissal I was accustomed to, but genuine curiosity. "You're very thorough, I've noticed." My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. In all my years of cleaning houses for the wealthy, no one had ever noticed my work beyond its completion. I was the ghost who made messes disappear, the shadow who restored order while the important people slept. "Thank you, ma'am," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. She nodded once, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips before she disappeared into her office, leaving me alone with the scent of her perfume and a feeling I couldn't quite name spreading warm through my chest. The rest of the day passed in a haze of routine tasks made extraordinary by that brief encounter. As I vacuumed the Persian rugs in the living room, I found myself replaying every second of our conversation. The way she'd looked at me, really looked at me, as if I were more than just hands that cleaned and a body that moved through her spaces. By evening, as I gathered my supplies to leave, I caught my reflection in one of the many mirrors that lined the hallway. At 42, I saw a woman shaped by years of hard work and single motherhood. My dark hair was streaked with premature gray, pulled back in the practical ponytail that had become my signature. Lines mapped the corners of my brown eyes, stories written in worry and laughter, and the thousand small struggles of raising a daughter on a cleaning lady's wages. I'd immigrated from El Salvador 15 years ago with nothing but hope and my 2-year-old daughter, Isabella. The American dream had proven more complicated than the story suggested, but I'd carved out a life through determination and the kind of work that made my back ache and my hands rough. Isabella was now 17, brilliant and bound for college, the embodiment of every sacrifice I'd ever made. As I walked to my 12-year-old Honda in the staff parking area, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted in the perfectly ordered universe of the Whitmore mansion. For the first time in 3 years, I'd been seen. Not just noticed, but truly seen. The October evening air carried the salt scent of the ocean and the promise of change. I drove home through the winding Malibu roads, past houses that gleamed like jewels against the hillsides, each one representing a world as distant from mine as the stars themselves. But Rebecca Whitmore had noticed my work. She'd remembered how long I'd been there. And in that moment when our eyes met in the brass reflection, something had passed between us. Recognition, perhaps, or the first stirring of something I didn't dare name. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The next morning brought an unusual request that would change everything. Mrs. Henderson, the head housekeeper, found me scrubbing the kitchen counters with my usual methodical precision, the early morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the mansion's spectacular ocean view. "Maria," she said, her British accent lending formality to even casual conversations. "Ms. Whitmore has requested that you personally handle the cleaning of her private study today. She's working from home and specifically asked for you." My stomach fluttered with nervous energy. In 3 years, I'd never been summoned to clean Rebecca's private sanctuary while she was present. The study was her command center, filled with multiple computer screens, business documents, and the kind of cutting-edge technology that controlled her vast empire. I knocked softly on the mahogany door, my cleaning supplies organized in the high, wheeled cart beside me. "Come in," her voice called from within, and I entered a world that embodied everything I found fascinating about Rebecca Whitmore. The study was a contradiction of feminine elegance and corporate power. Soft cream walls displayed original abstract paintings, while a massive oak desk commanded the center of the room. Multiple monitors displayed stock prices, business analytics, and video conference calls that connected her to boardrooms around the globe. Rebecca sat behind her desk wearing a silk blouse the color of champagne, her auburn hair catching the morning light as she reviewed documents that probably represented millions of dollars in business decisions. When she looked up at me, that same intensity from yesterday returned to her green eyes. "Maria, isn't it?" she asked, though something in her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Yes, ma'am." I began unpacking my supplies, hyper-aware of every movement under her scrutiny. "Please, call me Rebecca. We're going to be working in the same space today." The request shocked me. In my years of domestic work, employers maintained strict boundaries. First names were privileges reserved for equals, not staff. As I began dusting the bookshelves that lined the walls, filled with business journals, classic literature, and what appeared to be several volumes of poetry, I became aware of Rebecca, watching me work. Not the casual oversight of someone ensuring quality, but the focused attention of someone genuinely interested in the process. "You're very careful with the books," she observed, as I gently cleaned around a leather-bound collection of Pablo Neruda's poetry. "Books are precious," I replied without thinking, then immediately worried I'd overstepped some invisible boundary. "I mean, they deserve respect." Instead of the dismissal I expected, Rebecca's face brightened with genuine surprise. "You read poetry?" Heat flooded my cheeks. The question hung in the air like a challenge to the assumptions that usually governed our respective worlds. Sometimes, when I have time. The truth was more complex. I read voraciously, had devoured the classics during night shifts at the community college, where I'd earned my degree in literature before Isabella was born. But sharing that felt like revealing too much of the person behind the uniform. "Which poets do you enjoy?" Rebecca had swiveled in her chair to face me fully, her business documents apparently forgotten. "Neruda, Maya Angelou, Rumi." I answered honestly, my hands still moving automatically through the cleaning routine while my mind raced. Sometimes Emily Dickinson when I need to feel less alone. The admission slipped out before I could stop it, revealing more vulnerability than I'd intended. Rebecca's expression shifted, something soft and understanding replacing the corporate mask she usually wore. "I dwell in possibility," she quoted softly. "A fairer house than prose." Her voice carried the poetry with reverence, and I realized that beneath the business suits and boardroom confidence lived someone who understood the power of words to transform ordinary moments into something transcendent. For the next hour, we existed in an impossible space where a millionaire CEO and her cleaning lady discussed the metaphysical poets while I polished furniture and she answered emails. The conversation flowed naturally, punctuated by comfortable silences and the soft sounds of my work routine. "You have a daughter," Rebecca said eventually. Not quite a question, but an invitation to share. "Isabella. She's 17, planning to study engineering at UCLA next fall." Pride colored my voice despite my attempts to remain professional. "That must be expensive." The statement held no judgment, just observation. "We'll manage. She's brilliant. Scholarships, financial aid, whatever it takes." The fierceness in my own voice surprised me. Rebecca nodded slowly, and something in her expression suggested she understood the weight of sacrifice, the calculations that governed lives like mine. "Education changes everything. It's the only inheritance I can give her," I said, then immediately worried the comment revealed too much about our financial reality. But Rebecca's smile was gentle, understanding. The best kind of inheritance, one that can't be taken away. The morning stretched into afternoon, our conversation weaving between literature, business, family, and dreams. I learned that Rebecca's success came at the cost of relationships, that boardrooms filled with men twice her age had required her to develop armor that sometimes felt too heavy to remove. She learned that my dreams hadn't died when I became a single mother, just transformed into something more pragmatic and infinitely more precious. As the day waned and I prepared to leave, Rebecca stood from her desk with an elegance that seemed as natural as breathing. "Maria, would you consider having coffee with me? Tomorrow, after your shift?" "Not here," she added quickly, as if sensing my hesitation. "Somewhere neutral. There's a small cafe in town I enjoy." The invitation hung between us like a bridge across an impossible chasm. Everything in my experience warned against crossing professional boundaries, especially with someone whose world existed so far above mine. But something in her green eyes, hope, maybe, or loneliness that mirrored my own, made the answer obvious. "I'd like that," I heard myself say, and watched relief flood her features. "Good. Tomorrow then. The Blue Door Cafe on Pacific Coast Highway. 4 o'clock? 4 o'clock, I confirmed, my heart racing with possibilities I didn't dare examine too closely. That night, I lay awake in my small apartment, staring at the ceiling and wondering what force had shifted the foundations of my carefully ordered world. Tomorrow, I would sit across from Rebecca Whitmore not as her employee, but as... What? The question followed me into restless dreams, filled with marble floors and green eyes, and the impossible mathematics of two women from different worlds, finding common ground in poetry and the courage to reach across the divide. The Blue Door Cafe sat nestled between a surf shop and a vintage bookstore on Pacific Coast Highway, its weathered wood exterior and mismatched furniture creating the kind of casual atmosphere that made expensive clothes look pretentious. I arrived 10 minutes early, my hands trembling slightly as I ordered a simple black coffee and claimed a corner table where I could watch for Rebecca's arrival. I'd changed clothes 3 times that morning, finally settling on my best jeans and a soft blue sweater that Isabella had given me for Christmas. Standing before my bathroom mirror, I'd applied mascara with hands that shook with nerves, wondering what madness had possessed me to accept this invitation. Rebecca arrived precisely at 4 o'clock, but she looked nothing like the corporate powerhouse who commanded boardrooms and moved markets with her decisions. Instead of her usual tailored suits, she wore dark jeans that fit her perfectly and a cream-colored cashmere sweater that made her green eyes luminous. Her auburn hair fell loose around her shoulders, and without her usual armor of professional attire, she looked younger, more approachable, and impossibly beautiful. She spotted me immediately and smiled, that genuine expression I'd glimpsed in her study, free from the calculated precision of her business persona. As she approached my table, I stood awkwardly, unsure of the protocol for whatever this was. "Maria," she said warmly. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." "Thank you for asking," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. She ordered a lavender latte, something that seemed perfectly suited to this softer version of herself, and settled into the chair across from me. For a moment, we sat in silence, two women from impossibly different worlds, connected by something neither of us fully understood. "This feels strange, doesn't it?" Rebecca said finally, her fingers wrapped around her mug as if seeking warmth. "I've never done anything like this before." "What exactly is this?" The question escaped before I could censor it, and I immediately regretted my boldness. But Rebecca's smile was understanding rather than offended. "Honestly, I don't know. All I know is that yesterday, talking with you in my study, was the most genuine conversation I've had in months, maybe years." The admission hung between us, vulnerable and honest in a way that made my chest tight with emotion I didn't dare examine. "It felt real," I agreed softly. "Real," Rebecca repeated, as if testing the word. "Do you know how rare that is in my world? Most conversations are negotiations, power plays, or performances. People tell me what they think I want to hear, or what serves their interests. But you quoted Emily Dickinson while dusting my bookshelf, and suddenly I remembered why I fell in love with poetry in the first place." Her words painted a picture of loneliness that I recognized from my own life. Different circumstances, same isolation. It must be difficult, never knowing if people genuinely care about you or just what you can do for them. "Exactly." Rebecca's eyes widened with surprise, as if she hadn't expected such understanding. "Though I imagine you face different challenges. Single motherhood, working multiple jobs to support Isabella's dreams." The fact that she remembered my daughter's name, had absorbed the details I'd shared, sent warmth spreading through my chest. It's worth it, though. Watching her grow into this incredible young woman, knowing that every sacrifice opened doors for her that I never had. "Tell me about her," Rebecca said, leaning forward with genuine interest. For the next hour, I painted pictures of Isabella with words, her brilliant mind that solved calculus problems while other teenagers worried about social media, her determination to change the world through engineering, her gentle heart that still made room for movie nights with her overworked mother. Rebecca listened with the kind of attention I rarely received, asking thoughtful questions and sharing stories of her own teenage years, the pressure of expectations, and the weight of family legacy that had shaped her path. "I never had children," Rebecca said eventually, something wistful in her voice. "The business consumed everything. Every relationship became secondary to the next merger, the next acquisition, the next quarterly report that would prove I belonged in rooms full of men who saw me as an interloper." "Do you regret it?" I asked gently. She considered the question seriously, her green eyes distant with memory. "Sometimes, especially lately. Success is intoxicating, but it's also isolating. You build walls to protect yourself, and eventually, you realize the walls have become a prison." The vulnerability in her admission made me brave enough to share my own truths. "I used to write poetry," I confessed, the words feeling rusty from disuse. "Before Isabella, I thought I might study literature seriously, maybe teach someday, but life had other plans." "Do you still write?" "Sometimes. Late at night when Isabella's asleep and the apartment is quiet. Nothing important, just thoughts that need somewhere to go. I'd love to read your poetry sometime, Rebecca said, and the sincerity in her voice made my heart race. I couldn't. It's not very good, and you're so successful, so accomplished. Maria. She reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine in a touch that sent electricity through my entire body. Success in business doesn't make me a better person or more worthy of sharing beautiful things. If anything, it's made me forget how to appreciate beauty that can't be quantified in profit margins. Her touch lingered for a moment longer than necessary, and when she pulled her hand back, I felt the absence like a physical loss. The air between us had changed, charged with something unspoken but undeniable. This is complicated, I whispered, voicing what we both knew. Yes, Rebecca agreed, her voice equally soft. It is. But complicated doesn't always mean wrong. The cafe around us continued its normal rhythms. Baristas calling out orders, customers typing on laptops, couples sharing quiet conversations. But we existed in our own bubble of possibility and impossibility, drawn together by forces that defied logic or social expectation. What happens now? I asked, my heart pounding with hope and terror in equal measure. Rebecca's smile was tentative, but real. I don't know, but I'd like to find out. Would you meet me again? Maybe for dinner this time? Somewhere we can talk more, away from everything else. The invitation felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing that accepting would mean jumping into unknown territory with no guarantee of a safe landing. But something in Rebecca's eyes, the same loneliness and longing I saw in my own mirror every morning, made the choice inevitable. I'd like that, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. Tomorrow night? I know a little Italian place in Santa Monica. Nothing fancy, just good food and quiet corners for conversation. Tomorrow night, I agreed, and watched her face light up, with relief and something that looked remarkably like joy. As we parted ways in the cafe parking lot, Rebecca turned back one last time. Maria, thank you for seeing me, not just the image or the money or the power, just me. I watched her drive away in her sleek black Tesla, then sat in my aging Honda for several minutes, my heart racing with the magnitude of what was happening. Tomorrow night would be a date. There was no other word for it, despite the impossibility of the situation. A millionaire CEO and her cleaning lady, crossing boundaries that existed for good reasons, drawn together by poetry and loneliness, and the dangerous magic of genuine connection. The Trattoria Luna occupied a corner building in Santa Monica, its warm yellow walls and intimate lighting creating the kind of atmosphere where secrets felt safe and conversations could unfold without the weight of outside judgment. I'd spent an hour getting ready, changing outfits 4 times before settling on a simple black dress that Isabella had helped me pick out months ago for a job interview that never led to anything. "You look beautiful, Mama," Isabella had said as I prepared to leave our apartment, her wise 17-year-old eyes studying my face with concern and curiosity. "But be careful, okay? Rich people, they're different. They play by different rules." Her words echoed in my mind as I entered the restaurant, scanning the intimate space until I spotted Rebecca at a corner table, partially hidden by a decorative screen painted with climbing roses. She stood when she saw me, and my breath caught at the sight of her in a flowing emerald dress that complemented her eyes and made her look more like a work of art than a corporate executive. "You look stunning," she said softly as I approached, her voice carrying genuine appreciation rather than empty flattery. "Thank you. You look incredible," I replied, still struggling to believe this was really happening. The restaurant buzzed with the quiet energy of couples enjoying intimate dinners, the lighting soft enough to make everyone look like they belonged in a romantic painting. Rebecca had chosen our table perfectly, private enough for honest conversation, public enough to feel safe from the intensity that seemed to crackle between us whenever we were alone. We ordered wine, a Chianti that probably cost more than my grocery budget for a week, and I found myself relaxing as the alcohol warmed my blood, and Rebecca's genuine interest in my thoughts made me forget the vast differences in our circumstances. "Tell me about your poetry," she said after we'd shared stories about our childhoods. Hers privileged but pressured, mine humble but filled with love and books borrowed from the public library. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. "It's really not very good. Just thoughts, feelings, ways to make sense of things that don't always make sense. Everything doesn't have to be perfect to be beautiful," Rebecca said gently. "Some of the most powerful poetry comes from raw honesty, not polished technique." Emboldened by the wine and her encouragement, I pulled a folded piece of paper from my purse, a poem I'd written 3 nights ago, unable to sleep for thinking about our coffee date and the way she'd looked at me across that small table. "This is probably a mistake," I said, my hands trembling slightly as I handed her the paper. Rebecca unfolded it carefully, her eyes moving across my handwritten words, with the kind of attention usually reserved for important documents. The poem was simple, honest, about unexpected connections, about walls built to protect hearts that sometimes became prisons, about the courage required to reach across impossible divides. When she finished reading, tears sparkled in her green eyes. "Maria, this is beautiful. This line here, 'Loneliness dressed in silk still shivers in empty rooms.' It's exactly how I feel most days. How did you know?" "I recognize loneliness," I said quietly. "It looks different when you're wealthy versus when you're poor, but the ache is the same." She folded the poem carefully and held it against her chest. "May I keep this?" "Of course," I whispered, overwhelmed by her reaction. The conversation deepened throughout dinner, moving from poetry to dreams to fears to the complex reality of 2 women from different worlds, finding themselves drawn together by forces neither fully understood. Rebecca spoke about the pressure of being constantly scrutinized, of business decisions that affected thousands of jobs, of the loneliness that came with power that isolated as much as it elevated. I shared my own struggles, the exhaustion of working multiple jobs, the worry about Isabella's future, the small dreams I'd set aside but never quite abandoned. With each exchange, the barriers between us seemed to dissolve, replaced by understanding that transcended circumstances. "Can I tell you something?" Rebecca said as we lingered over dessert, her voice soft with wine and vulnerability. "I haven't felt this comfortable with anyone in years, maybe ever. With you, I don't have to perform or calculate or wonder about hidden agendas. I can just be." Her words sent warmth flooding through my chest, but also stirred anxiety about the impossibility of our situation. "Rebecca, what are we doing? This is beautiful, but it's also complicated," she finished. "I know. Believe me, I've thought about nothing else since yesterday. The practical considerations alone." She gestured vaguely, encompassing the vast differences in our social positions. Your employees, your social circle, the media. What would people think? Honestly, I've spent so much of my life worrying about what people think that I've forgotten how to listen to what I think, what I feel. She reached across the table, her fingers finding mine. "And I feel something for you, Maria. Something real and powerful and terrifying." The touch of her skin against mine sent electricity through my entire body. "I feel it too," I admitted, my voice barely audible above the restaurant's ambient noise. "But feeling something and acting on it, the risks for both of us. Especially for you," Rebecca said, her thumb tracing gentle circles on the back of my hand. "I have wealth and position to protect me from gossip. You have a daughter to think about, a job you could lose, a reputation in your community. I would never want to hurt you or Isabella." The consideration in her voice, the recognition of what I had to lose, made me love her just a little bit more. Love. The word surprised me with its sudden appearance in my thoughts, but I couldn't deny its truth. "So what do we do?" I asked. Rebecca's smile was sad but determined. "We're careful, we're smart, and we're honest with ourselves about what this is and what it could become. And what is it? I don't know yet. But I know I don't want it to end. Do you?" The question hung between us like a challenge and a promise. Every rational part of my mind screamed warnings about the dangers of getting involved with someone whose world was so different from mine. But my heart, that traitorous organ that had been dormant for so long, sang with possibilities. "No," I said finally. "I don't want it to end either." Relief flooded Rebecca's features and she squeezed my hand gently. "Then we'll figure it out. Together. One day at a time." As we left the restaurant, walking slowly through the Santa Monica evening air that carried the salt scent of the nearby ocean, I felt like I was sleepwalking through someone else's life. 3 days ago, I was invisible in Rebecca Whitmore's world. Tonight I was holding her hand as we walked past shops and cafes, talking about poetry and possibility while my heart raced with the enormity of what was happening. "Maria," she said as we reached our cars, parked side by side in the restaurant's small lot. "Whatever happens, whatever we decide or don't decide, thank you. You've reminded me that there's more to life than quarterly reports and board meetings. You've made me feel human again." Before I could respond, she leaned forward and kissed my cheek. Soft and gentle and full of promise. The simple gesture sent shockwaves through my entire body, and I knew with absolute certainty that my life had just changed forever. "Good night, Rebecca," I whispered. "Good night, Maria. Sweet dreams." I drove home through the Los Angeles night, my cheek still tingling from her kiss, my mind reeling with the implications of what we'd begun. Isabella was asleep when I arrived, but I stood in her doorway for a long moment, watching her peaceful face and wondering how to protect her from the complications that were about to enter our carefully ordered world. 2 months had passed since that first dinner. 2 months of secret meetings and carefully orchestrated encounters that felt like living in a beautiful, impossible dream. Rebecca and I had developed our own rhythm, coffee dates in small towns outside Malibu, walks on quiet beaches where we could talk without worry, evenings at her house after the staff had gone home, where we could simply exist together in her private world. The December morning air carried the crisp promise of winter as I arrived at the mansion for what would be my last day as Rebecca's cleaning lady. We'd made the decision together. The strain of maintaining professional distance while navigating our growing feelings had become unbearable, and Rebecca had quietly arranged for my transfer to a property management company she owned, managing several small apartment complexes in the valley. The new job came with better pay, health insurance, and flexible hours that would allow me to be more present for Isabella's final year of high school. But more importantly, it would give Rebecca and me the freedom to explore whatever we were becoming without the complications of employer-employee boundaries. Isabella had figured out that something was different weeks ago, her keen 17-year-old, intuition picking up on my improved mood, the secret smiles I couldn't quite hide, the careful attention I paid to my appearance even on cleaning days. "Mama, there's something different about you," she'd said one evening while we prepared dinner, together in our small kitchen. "You look happy, like really happy. Not just content or making the best of things happy. Actually happy." I'd deflected then, not ready to explain the impossible complexity of my situation. But now, as I prepared to leave the mansion for the last time in a professional capacity, I knew I'd have to tell her the truth. She deserved to understand the changes coming to our lives. Rebecca found me in her study, packing the last of my supplies into the cart that had been my companion for 3 years. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it, watching me with the soft expression that never failed to make my heart race. "So this is it," she said quietly. "The end of an era, the beginning of a new one," I corrected. standing to face her across the room that had become sacred space for us, where our first real conversation had unlocked everything that followed. She crossed to me with the fluid grace that characterized all her movements, stopping close enough that I could smell her perfume and see the gold flecks in her green eyes. "Are you sure about this? About us? Once we step outside the boundaries of your working here, everything changes. People will notice, will ask questions. Your daughter will need to know the truth." The concern in her voice, the way she prioritized my well-being over her own desires, made me love her even more deeply. Over the past 2 months, I'd learned that beneath Rebecca's polished exterior lived a woman of extraordinary kindness, brilliant humor, and a capacity for love that had been dormant for too long. "I'm sure," I said, reaching up to cup her face, with hands that had cleaned her house but now trembled with the desire to simply touch her. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." She leaned into my touch, her eyes closing briefly as if memorizing the sensation. "I love you, Maria. I've been wanting to say it for weeks, but I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" I whispered. "Afraid you'd think it was too fast, too complicated, too impossible. Afraid you'd run." "I love you too," I breathed, the words feeling like freedom and surrender all at once. "And I'm not running. Not from this. Not from you." She kissed me then, soft and gentle and full of promise, and I thought my heart might burst from the sheer joy of finally being able to love her openly, without hiding or pretending or calculating the risks. When we broke apart, both breathless and smiling, Rebecca took my hands in hers. "I want to do this right, Maria. I want to meet Isabella properly, as the woman who loves her mother, not as her mother's employer. I want to take you to dinner without worrying about who might see us. I want to wake up next to you and not have to sneak around like we're doing something wrong." "We'll have to be smart about it," I said, practical concerns tempering my joy. "The media attention, the gossip. Let me worry about that. I've dealt with media scrutiny my entire career. What matters is protecting you and Isabella from any fallout." That evening, I sat on Isabella's bed while she worked on calculus homework that looked like ancient hieroglyphics to my liberal arts brain, steeling myself for a conversation that would change everything for both of us. "Mia," I said, using the Spanish endearment that always got her attention. "I need to tell you something important." She set down her pencil and gave me the focused attention she'd inherited from both her parents, my intensity and her father's analytical mind. "This is about why you've been so happy lately, isn't it, my brilliant daughter?" "Yes, it's about Rebecca Whitmore." Isabella's eyebrows rose. "Your boss? The millionaire lady?" "Not my boss anymore. As of today, I'm working for her property management company instead. But yes, Rebecca, we've become close. Very close." I watched understanding dawn in Isabella's dark eyes, followed by surprise, concern, and finally something that looked like cautious acceptance. "Close how? Like dating?" "Close?" "Like falling in love close," I admitted, my heart pounding. Isabella was quiet for a long moment, processing this information with the careful consideration she applied to complex mathematical problems. "Are you happy, Mama? Really happy?" "Happier than I've been in years," I answered honestly. "And she treats you well? She's not using you or playing games?" The protective fierceness in my daughter's voice made my chest tight with pride and love. "She treats me like I'm precious, like I matter." Isabella nodded slowly. "Then I want to meet her, properly. Not as your employer, but as the woman who loves my mother." 2 days later, Rebecca arrived at our modest apartment in the valley, carrying a bouquet of sunflowers for me and a first edition copy of Maya Angelou's poetry for Isabella. She looked nervous in a way I'd never seen. This woman who commanded boardrooms and moved millions with her decisions genuinely worried about making a good impression on a 17-year-old. But Isabella, wise beyond her years and protective of those she loved, warmed to Rebecca's genuine interest in her dreams, her respectful questions about Isabella's engineering ambitions, and her obvious devotion to me. By the end of the evening, they were discussing college application strategies, and Rebecca was offering to connect Isabella with mentors in the tech industry. "I like her, Mama," Isabella told me later as we cleaned dishes together while Rebecca took an important call on the balcony. "She looks at you like you're the most important person in the world, and she listens to me like my thoughts actually matter." 6 months later, I stood in Rebecca's garden overlooking the Pacific Ocean, wearing a simple white dress and surrounded by the people who mattered most. Isabella beamed as my maid of honor, having formed her own special relationship with Rebecca. Over shared books and long conversations about changing the world, Mrs. Henderson dabbed her eyes with a lace handkerchief, proud to have witnessed the love story that began in the halls she oversaw. The ceremony was small, intimate, perfect. Nothing like the elaborate social events that usually marked milestones in Rebecca's world. Instead, it was authentic, like everything about our relationship, focused on love rather than spectacle. As Rebecca and I exchanged vows we'd written ourselves, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. From invisible cleaning, lady to beloved partner, from loneliness to love, from impossibility to the most natural thing in the world. "Maria Santos," Rebecca said, her voice strong and clear as she looked into my eyes. "You taught me that the most valuable things in life can't be bought or sold or listed on financial statements. You taught me to see beauty in small moments, to find poetry in ordinary days, to believe that love is worth every risk. I promise to love you, support your dreams, and cherish the extraordinary woman you are, every day for the rest of my life." My own vows came from the deepest part of my heart. "Rebecca Whitmore, you saw me when I was invisible, valued me when I felt worthless, and loved me when I thought love was something that happened to other people. You taught me that dreams don't have expiration dates, that it's never too late to reach for happiness, and that sometimes the most impossible love stories are the most true. I promise to stand beside you, to be your partner in all things, and to love you with everything I am." As we kissed to seal our promises, Isabella cheered loudly enough to startle the seagulls, and I knew that every moment of uncertainty, every risk we'd taken, every boundary we'd crossed had led us exactly where we belonged. The reception was held on the mansion's terrace, strung with lights that twinkled like stars above the ocean. Isabella gave a toast that made everyone cry, talking about watching her mother bloom like a flower in sunlight, about finding family in unexpected places, and about believing in love that defies logic. "When I was little," Isabella said, raising her champagne glass, "my mama used to tell me that fairy tales weren't real, that real life was about hard work and making smart choices and taking care of the people you love. But watching her with Rebecca, I learned that maybe the best fairy tales are the ones that grow out of real life, built on genuine love and mutual respect and the courage to believe that impossible things can become inevitable." To Maria and Rebecca, may your love story inspire others to believe in their own happily ever after. As the evening wound down and our few guests departed, Rebecca and I walked hand in hand along the beach below the mansion, our bare feet in the sand, my wedding dress flowing in the ocean breeze. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't asked you to dust those books that day?" Rebecca mused, her thumb tracing circles on my palm. "I think we would have found each other eventually," I said, surprising myself with my certainty. "Some connections are too strong to miss forever. Maybe it would have taken longer. Maybe it would have happened differently. But I believe we were meant to find each other." "My romantic wife," Rebecca said, stopping to pull me into her arms. "I love that about you. You taught me to believe in things that can't be measured or quantified or put into spreadsheets. And you taught me that I deserve love, that my dreams matter, that it's never too late to become the person I was meant to be." Above us, the mansion glowed with warm light, no longer a symbol of unattainable wealth, but simply home. The place where we'd learn to love each other, where Isabella would always have a room, where our impossible love story had become the most natural thing in the world. A year later, I published my first collection of poetry, dedicated to Rebecca, who taught me to believe in love, and Isabella, who taught me that courage comes in many forms. The book became a surprise bestseller, resonating with readers who recognized their own stories of unexpected love, second chances, and the magic that happens when we're brave enough to reach across the divides that separate us. Rebecca expanded her charitable foundation to focus on education and opportunities for immigrant families, creating scholarships and mentorship programs that opened doors for people who reminded her of the woman who'd changed her life while dusting bookshelves and sharing poetry in quiet moments. Isabella thrived at UCLA, double majoring in engineering and creative writing, carrying forward the lessons she'd learned from two women who'd shown her that love comes in many forms, and that the strongest foundations are built on authenticity, respect, and the courage to be vulnerable. Sometimes when I'm working in the garden of our Malibu home, I think about that October morning when our eyes met in the reflection of brass door handles, when a millionaire fell in love with her cleaning lady who happened to be me. I think about the poetry that brought us together, the conversations that deepened our connection, and the love that transformed both our lives in ways we never could have imagined. Our story proved that love doesn't recognize boundaries of class or status or expectation. It grows where it will, flourishes when tended with honesty and care, and creates its own logic that makes the impossible inevitable. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.